Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are talking about the impact of positive interpersonal relationships on mental health. Joining me in the virtual studio today is Simon Leow. Simon is the co-founder of Happiness Initiative. It is a social enterprise dedicated to promoting happiness and well-being in Singapore and the region. Simon is fascinated with the science of well-being. He holds a master in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. He believes that well-being skills can be made accessible to everyone. Simon oversees the research and development department at Happiness Initiative. Thanks so much for joining us today, Simon.
Hi, Lou, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, well, I am fascinated by your fascination with well-being, and so I have to ask. I know you did a degree in applied positive psychology,
Yep.
but what led you to co-found the Happiness Initiative?
Okay. Wow. When I came back, right, to Singapore, I realized that then in 2015, I finished the master's in 2015 back in Singapore here is the landscape on mental health was about treatment, and there was no landscape then. It wasn't developed on prevention. So I founded Happiness Initiative because I thought that a lot of psychological science could be used in the preventive space.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great insight because I guess in general, when we think about mental health well-being, especially in the region of Asia or Southeast Asia, it's kind of like a non-existent space. And treatment is, like you said, I agree. It's like the main thing. Like when something bad happens, you go to treatment, and it's kind of like a taboo thing or a really bad thing. But we don't really talk much about preventative, approaches. And so I think this is a great thing that you do. So, if you were to talk a bit more about the organization and what you do, what are actually the key things that you do at Happiness Initiative?
Oh, okay. So Happiness Initiative, right, is a social enterprise, a research-based social enterprise. We try to make well-being skills accessible. So there are lots of research in the realm of well-being, what works, what may not work as well, or what may not have. We are not sure whether they work well or not, right? There are a lot of research that has been going on out there since year 2000, and we want to translate all this research into programs and products for people to be able to access some of these psychological science.
Mm.
Yep. So that's what we primarily do. We interact with three groups of people: the corporates, the community, and the schools. So there are these three groups of people, right, that actually would benefit very well from some of these well-being skills.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think as we are a collective and a community, we always need more initiative related to happiness and well-being. And it seems like what you are doing at Happiness Initiative is quite similar to what we're doing at the Wellbeing Science Labs. And we're achieving the same goals with different global audiences. And I think that's the great thing about this space. The more initiatives, the better. So it's great to see that you're also in the space. So I have another question for you personally. So obviously, as you work in this space, and this is my fascination as well. I like that people are getting more and more into the space. But what drives you to show up at work every day?
Wow. My interest in research, my deep interest in research, right? And also my deep interest in understanding the human psychology, right? So my work is about research, trying to either run some studies, trying to understand what works and what don't. And I think because I'm fascinated by the research part of it, and particularly the statistic part of it, things right, and that totally absorbed me. Yeah. So I love to show at work because of that. But there's also another part is that I love to understand human psychology. I love to understand human behavior, and I would always ask why. Why is a person behaving like this? What could be factors that lead to the person behaving like this? Could the person have been something? What's driving the person? And because I'm genuinely interested in people, right? And this is a piece of work that I do to make the well-being skills accessible to people. Uh, yeah, that just uh, that's why in days that is really tough, because I'm still enjoying what I'm doing, the statistic part and about making the skills accessible to people. That's why I show up at work.
Yeah, beautiful. I think it's great because it's one thing to study a certain field, and it's another thing to actually show up every day because you truly enjoy the work that you're doing, and because you're so interested in understanding and knowing humans better. I think today's topic is perfect for you because what makes interpersonal relationships humans. There you go. So we'll have fun with it.
I try because I think that human beings are complex. We are unique and we are complex, and I may not have, or we as a human species, I may not have all the answers for everything.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn. And that's the fascinating things about humans.
Mhm.
We're just here, but the more we evolve, the more we learn about ourselves. And I think that's like the really fun part. So before we get into that part of the conversation, we have an opening segment where we talk about you a bit more. And it's called Have You Met Simon? So we're gonna get to know you more through some of your favorite things or things you love. First of all, what is your favorite book?
Interestingly, it is this book, right, that actually got me out of a very tough period. Maybe 12 years back, I came across this book, A New Earth, Eckhart, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, so it has always been the book that I really love. It's a spiritual book. It's about the voice in the head. That's not his first book, I think. But it was one of the book that got him very famous. Because Oprah Winfrey was doing a book club and actually introduced his book, and a friend was reading about the book, shared with me. I was going through a very difficult period of my life. I read the book, and when I was traveling for 6 months, the book was with me. And it talks about, there's always the voice in the head, the ego in us, and how our ego uh, shapes our interaction with another person's ego, and all the drama is all being played out. And then it's because I read the book in like 2012, 2014. I was doing my master's program, right? At UPenn. That has always been on my mind. Could we find an intersection between science and spirituality? Because what he was describing the book was about in the spiritual realm about ego. But do we have, science can we measure it? Can we test it? Can we have a hypothesis, a theory around it? So that has always been my fascination.
Yeah, absolutely. His first book, I think, is The Power of Now, which is
The power of
also
now.
one of my favorites. And I read A New Earth probably 2 years ago. And yeah, it's really profound. I really like where you're going with the thinking, though, because it's true. Like, do we have an intersection between science and spirituality? I think there should be, because it's just there's a lot that I think this is how I see spirituality. There's so much that is relatable, and yet it's not really translated into something that is scientific, or it doesn't have that much of a scientific approach yet. I think there's more and more research being done nowadays, but I'm not sure where the space is at. So that's probably the most interesting part.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And much later when I was trying to um, develop some of the themes, right, a happiness initiative, and one of the theme that we have developed, a theme around the well-being skills, is on mindset. And I think it connects back with the book because a lot of times we interpret an event through the belief system that we have, and hence leading to consequent emotions and action. And the belief could be what, in that spiritual realm, right? I was talking about the ego because the belief has got so much baggage, so much past experiences. It could be painful experiences that shapes the way we see the world, this whole body of beliefs that we have. In science, we call them beliefs, mindset, but maybe in that spiritual book, they call it ego.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That is something to ponder for sure. And what about a movie you've enjoyed recently?
Ah, let me try to get this name right. What, Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah. It's
it's
so
it's
interesting.
it's profound. It's
Yeah.
profound that yeah, it's just profound. And I think maybe, for someone who loved the intersection between science and spirituality, right? That's the movie, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really funny. Like the first thing that came to my mind when I went to the movies to see it was it's extremely funny. But if you look beyond that, the sense of humor, there's so many things to learn from. Because it's a story about life,
Yep.
relationship, people, family. It's just so much packed into that. What seemingly to be a very hilarious movie that it's for some people, like maybe the younger audience might see it and kind of go, doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so layered. It's just so layered, right? And I think everyone, I would think that it speaks to every generation quite differently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So but and what makes it so attractive, that movie, right, is maybe because every generation makes a different meaning out of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess that's how we see things in life as well. Each generation or each person has a unique perspective about something, even if the same movie, same book, same podcast. And speaking of podcast, you're on our show as a guest, but do you listen to podcasts yourself?
um, I I was introduced to podcasts, right? Maybe I think during the COVID period.
Yeah.
Not as a listener, but more so because there was someone who were trying to collaborate with us, and he wanted to do a series of podcasts, and he wanted to get it started in Singapore, but it was difficult to get started in Singapore, and I think we're still catching up. We may not be as advanced as some other country, and he found it difficult. But that few 1 or 2 years when he was trying to record the podcast, right? Um, uh, I was on his show and was trying to also help him to get other people to be on his show. And what helped him then was that it was a stepping stone for him to go into another media job. So after COVID, and he actually, with his experience in doing podcasts, he went into a media job, and I think was doing something around podcasts. So to be very honest, right, I don't actively listen to podcasts, but I can see how beautiful it is as a genre, right, to be able to connect with people and bring
Yeah.
to be able to bring people together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like us talking right now, thanks to
Mhm.
podcast, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And do you have a role model or maybe multiple role models or just people you look up to in life?
Mm-mm. I have one. I have one. The Dalai Lama. Okay. Uh, I think I I got to know about him was because one long time ago, right? I was browsing at a bookstore and I found there's this book, The Art of Happiness. Yeah. So, and I think like kind of, happiness has always been on my mind, even though I'm a science, math graduate, right? I've always been always been asking, what makes us happy? And that book caught my attention. I read the book and I got to know about him. And um, like 12 years ago, during that period of my life where I was really, really quite, uh, was a low point in my life, right? And I decided to go to India. So I was in Dharamshala, doing a meditation retreat. And after the retreat in Dharamshala, right? So people were going to the temple because they say that the Dalai Lama would be giving an audience. So I went and I saw him. And I saw that there was this group of American group because there were lots of people and they were all seated in their groups. So this group of Americans, they were all waving. I was wondering who are they waving? Oh, because Richard Gere was there. Yeah, and I think he's a good friend with the Dalai Lama, and he was there as well, and I reached out my hand, right, and yeah, I got a handshake from the Dalai Lama.
Oh,
So that was the closest I ever got, yeah,
that's
to him.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
And
but why him, right? Why
yeah,
him?
yeah, and
Because
why?
why him was really because I just enjoy that 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 space to be human, and that space to appreciate suffering and happiness. So not very many people would be able to appreciate the space between happiness and suffering. We tend to gravitate towards happiness and we are very averse to suffering. But he's one person that I think he could see that both happiness and suffering are two sides of the same coin.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a profound insight for sure. And that's what we've talked about quite a bit on this show. So it's very on topic. And finally, in this part, I would love to know about a course you've taken. And this could be something that happened a long time ago that is impactful in your life.
Oh, okay. And that's really my master's course at the University of Pennsylvania, master's in applied positive psychology. How I got to that course, right, was I was traveling and one morning, right, I was in Europe. I think I was in Germany. I was at a train station and one morning queuing up at the bakery, right, I saw this service staff. He wasn't very happy. And I was then, trying to get out of my very low point in my life, right? And he wasn't very happy early in the morning. So suddenly I got that thought in my mind, and I think that people wants to be happy, but they may not know how to. I went online to search masters in happiness. It pointed out me to two places: master in culinary in Italy or masters in applied positive psychology at UPenn. And I decided that I love both, but food can wait. So I applied for UPenn. And I got admitted in 2014. I get accepted into the program, 2014. And that course really inspired me because they have the youngest was in their 20s and the oldest in the group, right, was in his 60s. So we had a very big age gap. It's a master program. You bring lots of people who are in different phase of their life, but they care about well-being. They wanted to learn more about well-being, And I met the most amazing group of people in that course. Yeah.
Mm.
And that course
Yeah.
really changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And I think that just speaks to well-being, right? Because the audience of well-being is everyone. And so everyone is interested to learn to know about well-being to a certain extent. But yeah, to be kind of getting into that education is the next step. So it's great to know that you not only enjoy the course, but you made a lot of great connections in the course with like-minded people.
Yep, indeed. And some of my classmates, it has almost been 10 years after the course, but we still keep in touch and we are planning a reunion next year.
That's
Yeah.
so great. So perfect timing to talk about the course.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so now that we've got to know you a bit better, let's talk about today's topic. We are here to talk about the impact of positive interpersonal relationship on mental health. And the show is about well-being, and your work is also about well-being. So let's start there. Let's talk about your personal perspective of well-being. What do you think of it?
Well-being, right? We can look at it from two perspectives. We could look at it from a measurement perspective. Maybe we define some outcomes. We could measure them. For example, right, we could look at like maybe one measurement of well-being could be the mental health continuum. They look at three aspects of well-being, right? Psychological well-being, social well-being, and emotional well-being. So you could actually measure well-being, or you could look at it from a skill sets perspective. What are things that we do that could improve our well-being, right? So and because when you look at the both look at skill sets or look at measurement, right? Then the next question people would ask is that can we define it? Can we unpack what is well-being? Um, as of now, I think that no one. I think different researchers or different organizations may unpack well-being differently, and where we are at Happiness Initiative, right, is not trying to unpack well-being, but rather look at what are skills, what are behaviors, what are actions that people could do that could improve well-being. We look at it from five themes. First, what we think, our mindset, what we do, we could call it the passion that we have or things that engages us. Um, the third would be relationships, the people that are around us. The fourth would be other-centeredness. So relationships are more of people that we know. Other-centeredness, I look at it more at a community level. So beyond people whom we know, right? From self-centered to other-centered. And of course, the last one is our purpose. So we look at what are things or behaviors that people could take to improve well-being. There are out there measurements of well-being, and the measurements of well-being would also bring about, how well-being is being unpacked. Yeah, and one example that is the mental health continuum that unpack well-being. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a great definition, especially in the context of today's topic, because one of the pillars you were talking about there is relationships. And, interpersonal relationships is what we're going to cover today. So I think interpersonal relationships, the one that you just talked about there, they are closely related. So I guess that's why we can base our conversation around because it's one of the key pillars for well being. Um, but what about some of the misconceptions about well-being? Because you've studied a lot of different things about this space, and you have that fascination about humans. What do you think humans tend to get wrong when they think about well-being?
Maybe one of the misconception is that, um, or I'm mm, okay. I'm not sure whether I would call it a misconception, but rather it may not, or rather maybe it may not be on people's mind, right? That well-being takes effort. Yeah, well-being requires a lot of work. And well-being is not something that, you snap your finger, right? And you would almost immediately feel good about it, right? And uh, that is one, well-being takes effort. And the second thing about well-being that maybe may not bring about, which may not be on people's mind, right, is that um, well-being, I um w- um well-being is different from happiness, right? Um, Well-being has a much broader sense, and happiness is an outcome. So I see it as well-being as, you know, when you improve your well-being, you may be happier. But I don't, and sometimes it really depends on how people define well-being. But I think I would still circle back to something more important, right? That well-being takes effort, and I think that it may not be on people's mind. And what exactly is well-being? It goes back to whether you want to focus on skills or you want to focus on outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's that intersection as well between happiness and well-being, and for some, they kind of think about them as the same, whereas they might be slightly different. There might be that uh, relationship where you feed one and then you get the other, or you kind of have to uh, find the relationship between certain aspects of each. So that's why we're all learning about this. I think it's definitely a new thing for a lot of people, especially if they didn't really pay attention to things like mental health before. They probably just think of well-being as physical well-being, and that makes you happy as long as you're healthy. Actually, it's a common thing that people say in Vietnam. Be happy, be healthy. I don't know if it's the same thing in Singapore, but here in Australia, I know that there's a slightly stronger emphasis on uh, a combination of all aspects of well-being, and that impacts happiness as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. When we talk about well-being, and if you want to really try to understand how well-being is a bit different from happiness, right? There's a big organization, Gallup, and I think most people know Gallup, right? And they have this well-being survey, and they look at well-being, they unpack well-being in 5 domains: social well-being. And social well-being is very much your interpersonal relationship, social well-being. Community well-being, when you serve a community and you're part of a larger community, so community well-being. They have the originally their term was occupational well-being, but now they have renamed it is to purpose. You are part of something. It could be your work, or it could be something that you are part of that engages you. So purpose is one well-being domain. Physical well-being and financial well-being. So Gallup unpacked this, in these few domains, these 5 domains of well-being, and you can see that all this, if you're done well, may lead to an outcome of happiness. So sometimes we look at happiness as a goal, but well-being could be areas in your life, right, that you could work on that may bring about happiness. Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really tough space to fully understand. And, the more research there is to be done, the more new information there would be for us to digest. So we can start small with today's topic, because you actually just mentioned relationships again in the context of well-being, and interpersonal relationships, definitely part of that. I think for most people who are tuning into the podcast, they probably know what interpersonal relationships means already. So maybe we can start slightly differently from how we go about these topics. Instead of defining interpersonal relationships, I would love to get your perspective on what contributes positive interpersonal relationships.
And one of the so interestingly, one of the psychological question that we ask, right, about whether people have good interpersonal relationship, is this question that, if you uh, if at 4 a.m. and if you need someone to call, is that someone that you could actually call at 4 a.m. in the morning?
Mm.
So if you would, and that question brings back this question that is very common. Uh, um, is there someone that we could turn to at 4 a.m. in the morning if we really need help? So, and I think if there is someone who is willing to pick up your call and be with you, I think that is really a good definition of a positive interpersonal relationship.
Mm. So, if you say that it's similar to that analogy, that question that tends to get asked, I also know about that. I don't remember exactly where it came from, but does it mean that if an interpersonal relationship is good, you can call that person at 4 a.m.?
Uh,
Does it
I
apply to all relationships?
Maybe not all. I think that there are people whom you can count on in your lowest moment, that you could be vulnerable with, and I think that is what makes a positive interpersonal relationship so special.
Mm. Yeah. So I think it kind of ranges from sort of close circles, and then you've got the further out circles in your life, and you've got interpersonal relationships with all of those people. And like you were saying, there's some people that you can really count on and call at 4 a.m., whereas there are some other people that you kind of like your friends, for example, but you're not that close. But I think the friends that you're not that close with can also maybe foster a good connection, or positive connections that can impact your well-being. Would you say that is the case, or only the people in our closer circles would enhance our well-being?
I think everyone, and I think that all the friends that comes along your way, right, have potential to make a difference in our well-being journey. Um, for and I think what makes it different, right, would be one key idea about empathy. And I think what makes, like even people whom you just meet, and how would they even make a difference on in our well-being experience, right? If I were to drill down to that one key idea is about empathy, the ability for them to empathize with us, what we are going through, or what we are sharing, and for us to be able to empathize with them.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that makes a lot of sense if you think about people not in our inner circle but can relate to us, in some ways. I think that's interesting because in the past I used to think that only our close friends make us happy and help to improve our well-being, especially our mental well-being. But recently, what I've noticed is like random strangers can enhance your well-being, or maybe people that you're not that close to but you talk to probably like once a month can help if they relate to you on certain levels with certain things. Like that's my personal observation. I'm not sure if there's any research to back that up, but I find that fascinating because it's very different from, oh yeah, only people that I talk to every day helps me with my well-being.
And I think the connection that you feel, right, may be related to this idea about empathy. Because if they could empathize with what you're sharing with them, that is a connection. And it doesn't necessarily just have to come from close friends. It could be like friends that I've met, and you may not meet them so often, right? But because they would be able to empathize with what you're sharing with them, and likewise, you empathize with what they're sharing with you, right? I would think that that's a connection.
So yeah, I think you're so right in saying that empathy is like that key driver that helps interpersonal relationships and improve our well-being along the way. Uh, But I think a lot of people struggle when it comes to certain aspects of relationships. So, as you said before, I think before we start the podcast, we were kind of discussing interpersonal relationships. Like, does it cover romantic relationships or just friendships or so on? Family, too, right? There's so many different types of interpersonal relationships. So, what are the key differences between them? Like, do we get the same effect from all relationships for our well-being because of empathy, or is there something else there that we should look out for?
In 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 my work, when we run this community well-being program, right, called Wellbeing Circles, we try to invite participants to try this. Take the attachment style survey, to try to understand the attachment style and apply the survey in the context of family, parents, in the context of romantic loved ones, and in the context of friends. And sometimes, as they fill up that survey, right, depending on the context that they're in, they do have quite different attachment style. I haven't seen enough research that really look at these three different categories, right? But in our work with our community groups, our participants do share with us that they may respond quite differently depending on the context. And maybe there could be some past experiences that could be at play. Parents could have a lot of influence over us and hence develop or reinforce certain attachment style that we have. Our loved ones sometimes also it depends on past love relationship and also our relationship with our parents, right? It also shapes uh, certain attachment style. And friends, depending on our past friendship, may also have different attachment style. So I would think that um, the way we respond, right, could be quite different. But but I think deep down inside, right, there could be common themes. There may be common themes that cut across the way we respond to our parents, the way we respond to our romantic loved ones, and the way we respond to our friends. But I think the theme get that more and more similar as it get closer and closer to us. For example, if the relationships get closer and closer to us, right, I think that the themes would get more and more similar.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to kind of look at how we respond to different types of relationships. And I think there would be the kind of similar trend, like, this group of close friends, you probably would respond to them in a very similar way. Whereas, let's say a group of colleagues, you respond to them in another way. The key thing that you mentioned before, which is interesting though, is understanding attachment styles. Because I think before I learned about attachment styles, this is like personal experience. I only learned about it about 2 years ago in more detail. And I found it fascinating because I never heard of attachment styles before. And then once I started hearing about it, I hear about it everywhere. And what I found is you kind of have to understand your own attachment style and past issues that form that attachment style so that you can understand how you respond to different people and situations, especially in interpersonal relationship. And I've noticed, for example, I respond to this friend completely different from I respond to another friend. And that is because, while one made me feel safe and secure because they kind of, everything they do meets my needs. The other one is kind of leaving me hanging and not consistent enough. So that's kind of leaving me like question about whatever the friendship is about. So uh, the two friendships, after a long time, sort of became like the closeness between me and those two friends are kind of similar. But I noticed that I had to learn how to manage my expectations and how I manage those two relationships. And they are different because they brought out different types of attachment style in me. So the most interesting part about all of this is there's not one attachment style that applies to each of us. With each different interpersonal relationship, there is a attachment style. So that was kind of like when I found out, I was like, whoa, that is so much work, especially when you want to nurture interpersonal relationships. You have to do so much work on yourself to understand what's going on with yourself first.
Which is true, right? Because we may have a certain attachment style that has been developed over the years, and different friends bring out, can reinforce the attachment style or could make us more secure, and and it's just so much work that we have to do because every interaction
Mm.
brings out a very different, responses in us depending on our attachment style, which also means that it circle back to that very important idea there about empathy, right? The ability to empathize with the other person. Very much sometimes the other person may be unaware of his or her attachment style and could be responding in a way that is a default mode. And it's just so much of this intermeshed of uh, issues and default attachment style, and because of a responses and hence a corresponding attachment style respond. So I just think that what may help us may be aware of it ourselves and sometimes have the empathy that there's always pain in the room.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think this piece of learning about ourselves and understanding like the different patterns that might emerge, that's quite interesting and probably a new thing to some of our audience because to me it's like a new thing as well. So when you explained it, I'm like, okay, so where do we go with this? If we have this knowledge that positive interpersonal relationships can improve our well-being, and we know that it takes a lot of work for us to improve each interpersonal relationship, what kind of effort should we make to make sure that we have positive interpersonal relationships throughout, like in all different kinds of relationship, regardless of how close we are with these people? There are probably certain things that we can do across the board.
I see this as a balance that we have to care about ourselves because we have needs that we need to fulfill. And if we give everything to someone else, right, to all the relationships, we may end up with nothing for ourselves. And that may not be positive. So, understanding what we need is important. But yet, it's always a balance of being aware of our needs and not being, and it's not the only thing that shapes our relationship. It's not just all about us. It's also about someone else. So it's having the balance to understand our own needs and also understand the other person's needs, and to be able to could I address your needs while not neglecting my own needs. So I think that's it's always easier said than done, right? Um, but a lot of times is like a friend have a rough, is going through a rough times. Yeah, a friend would want to ask, "Oh, could you make time over this weekend?" And I know that I have a lot of work to clear, right? But yet I know that I need to give space for my friend. My friend needs me there. Is there a way that okay, I while taking care of what I need to do, yet make time for my friend, right? So it's finding the balance there, not neglecting what we have, what we need, but yet being there for someone else needs.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the toughest part, right? Finding that balance and understanding what we need to do for our own needs and our friends or other people's needs in certain situations to foster these positive relationships is tough because sometimes some of us have people pleasing nature. And then we would want to make other people happy so that the relationship is happy or positive in general. And then by doing so, we actually we create this opposite uh, effect, because we hold some sort of resentment because we are sacrificing time to be with friends, or we're doing something we don't really want just to keep the relationship in that quote unquote positive space. So I think there's probably some caveat here. It's not always easy to find that balance, and for some people it might take them longer to figure out the balance. For example, starting by saying no, that can improve the relationship, for example.
Yep, and true. And I think this conversation with you and maybe with the audience listening, right, helps me to synthesize this idea. What exactly is a positive interpersonal relationship? And I think we are coming up with something that a positive interpersonal relationship is where there's a balance of each other's needs,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
saying no, right? By that definition, because it's a balance of each other's needs, right? It's actually a positive, is a positive experience in the interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it helps to learn to manage expectations as well. Because if we don't really pay attention to both sides, and we don't communicate well, we don't manage expectations, our own expectations first, and then the other person's expectations, we might end up in a space where there's mismatch in understanding. Like, oh, I thought that was okay with you. It wasn't. I didn't know. This is okay with me. But then, you forgot to ask the other person. So I think it's interesting to manage all kinds of relationship, all kinds of interpersonal relationships because of that. Sometimes we don't communicate enough, and we're just kind of here in our head. We're like, oh yeah, like this should work, without saying it out loud.
And when you talk about communication, right? Actually, this concept came up, yeah, like to me, right? Is nonviolent communication
Mm.
by Marshall Rosenberg.
Mhm.
So, he unpacked it, the way we have to communicate non-violently. There are like four parts to it: making an observation, talking about feelings, doing the understanding the needs, and making a request. So I think the hardest part there is to be able to explain, to be aware and explain your needs to the other person.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you could do that well, right, you could actually bring about more constructive communication. And it goes back, and that model also brings back the idea of communicating our needs.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And speaking of great points, let's make one final great point before we move on from the episode. So we have this section called Habits and Practice, and we would love to get you to share a practice or a habit that you do yourself personally, or something that you think you would recommend to anyone listening to this podcast to try so that they can improve their interpersonal relationships.
One of the things that I try every morning when I walk my dog, right, is loving kindness meditation. So a lot of times, because I have to walk my dog and like bring him for his run, right, and I realize that I may not have the time and space on weekdays to sit down for like 5-10 minutes because I have a routine. And I think that you could still apply loving kindness meditation uh, when when I'm walking or jogging my dog. So it is to have that unconditional positive regard for yourself and for others. So it still goes back to the empathy and balancing the needs. So you could express loving kindness for yourself, then express loving kindness to someone else that you know, and to someone else that you may not know. And that itself, I think we can actually Google it, loving kindness meditation. There are lots and lots of resources online. And I tried this, and I tried this for myself. Right, it helps me to develop a more secure attachment style. It helps me to be more empathetic to some other people. So it's a practice that is easy to do, and is really a recommendation from me. Loving kindness meditation.
Yeah, I love that. I think meditation has been suggested a few times on the show, but loving kindness meditation is, unique and specific to this topic today, especially with interpersonal relationships, because it starts with ourselves, and then we, in turn, bring that out to other people. And I think when you talked about walking your dog in the morning and doing the practice, it's like really relatable, because a lot of people might have things that they do in the morning. Like I, for example, wake up and first thing I do is I run to the gym. So on the way, instead of listening to random music, I can actually do that. So that's a really good thing. So thank you for the recommendation. And before we close the podcast, we have open mic. And as I mentioned to you at the beginning, this is your platform to share about anything you would like to share with our audience. So go for it, Simon.
Yeah, so one of the things that I really love to do, right, would be a well-being retreat. So I was looking at there are great resorts in the world, and they may not cost a lot of money, right? And could we run a well-being retreat in some of these beautiful resorts? And one of the places I've been looking at is Bali. I was also looking at another place, uh, a, a number of places in Vietnam, actually. A beautiful place. I love Vietnam. And I think that we could actually go to this resort, experience well-being. It could be a journal, it could be a program giving us our space to introspect, to check in with ourselves and feel rejuvenated after, because in our busy modern day world now, we just don't have time. And I was thinking of this because a lot of times we travel, but we travel maybe not mindfully. Sometimes after a travel, we come back even more tired, feeling more tired. So I'm just thinking, could we have another space whereby we travel for a well-being retreat, whereby we could actually give ourselves time to check in with our own well-being? Yeah, so that has been on my mind. Yeah, so well-being retreat, or sometimes we call it a well-being resort. If anyone is interested in this piece of work, right, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so, if our audience would like to reach out to you about that well-being retreat or resort, where should they go?
Um, Simon at happinessinitiative.sg. That's my email.
Yeah, any social media or website you would like to share?
Oh, yes. Happinessinitiative.sg is our website, and also our Instagram, happinessinitiative.sg.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for being on our show.
Thanks, Lu. Thank you, and a wonderful day for all our audience. And may you have a wonderful, positive interpersonal relationship.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.